Hello. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Oh my goodness, you guys. It's Friday, and I have been looking forward to this all week. So excited to do this second Astrology and Coffee live stream. Whether you are able to be here live on Friday mornings or you're catching the replay, I am here for you on Friday mornings to talk about this week's transit energy. And especially when the energy feels gigantic like it does today, I feel like I started doing these like exactly at the right time. So excited to dive into all of the things. We're going to get to all of it, and who knows how long that's going to take. I was thinking this morning about like what this feeling feels like the feeling that I have like the hour leading up to coming in here and doing this. And it feels like, for one thing, I'm not afraid like what I was before. So that's definitely new territory. Um, but what it feels like is like three really, like these three are their own really knowledgeable professor, and they all have their own message to share. And they are all inside of me. Like it's like three people's worth of excitement to share about these energies that I hold for like an hour before I come in here. So, and really, I look forward to it all week. So, yeah, super excited to be here. I do want to shout out some spiritual content that I found on YouTube in the last week. I'm going to try to do that at the beginning of every live stream, just as a way to kind of hang out and get the vibe set and to point you guys in the direction of some content that was potentially life-changing for me. So I always want to share. There's tons of stuff out there, and there's only so many hours in the day. So I'm always looking for recommendations. Feel free to leave me anything in the comments that you've stumbled across recently that you feel like was, just something that you needed to hear right now. And this video that I'm going to shout out from Consciousness Evolution Journey is the name of the channel, Consciousness Evolution Journey. And the video itself that I found is actually an energy reading, I think that she did at the end of 2019 for star seeds for the upcoming year. So like for 2020. I only listened to it a couple days ago, and I am like life changed. So the title of the video is Star Seeds, Where Are You From and Why Are You Here? So I have no doubt in my mind that I was supposed to hear that message like exactly when I did. It is not 2020 specific. It is starseed specific. So I also hadn't, like Maddie asked me this yesterday, so I hadn't really given a whole lot of thought to star seeds. And I had heard someone mention the concept of star seeds to me about a year ago, and she was really into it and was all up in her star seed identity. And I was like, that's cool. It seems like it's working for her, and I love that. I, at that time, like, didn't feel a need to dive into it. And really, even like this video, I didn't go seeking, like, show me about star seeds. It was just in my list of things that's like, hey, people who watch the things that you're watching, like, here, you might like this, that YouTube algorithm that gets so much hate for like radicalizing people. It can also like deepen your spiritual process if you're watching the right things on YouTube, if you're watching things that elevate your vibration and your consciousness. YouTube just like brings you things that here's some more to elevate your consciousness. Here's some more. This lady's channel, the Consciousness Evolution Journey. I've watched several of her videos this week, and she is just tuned into something like, holy moly, definitely time well spent to watch that starseed thing. And as I listened to it, and she kind of talked about this, but like she went through 5 different kinds of star seeds and did like a general reading for each kind of starseed. And so at the very beginning, she read like a channel description of each kind that she had that message had come through. And so you listen at the beginning to find out like which of these 5 kinds of star seeds resonates most with you. Like, does it pull at you? Like, does that sound like the story of your life? And if it doesn't, like, no big deal. But if one of them, like, so I listen to all 5 and I pick out 2 and 3 where I'm like, I mean, these are both very accurate. And she says that's possible when like you come from one of them, but you're here, like your function by coming here is to work with the other. So that was super cool. So as I listened to the reading for the second one, which was sun seeds, um, that one resonated like big time. And then I listened to the third reading, which was for spirit seeds, and I was like, nope, I'm this one. Like this is really what I'm here to do. And I do think I'm here to like work with sun seeds, and that there's just this harmony and connection between all of that. So, you know, do I need to know that I'm a star seed to do good things on this planet? No. But is it fun to look at yourself from a different angle and maybe pick up just even one more handful of self-empowerment? Yeah, yeah, time well spent. So highly recommend that video. It's in the description. Um, yeah, that feels complete. And I also want to add in here, so after last week's live stream, I do know that my internet is not ideal. It's like a 10 down, 10 up kind of connection, like the weakest Wi-Fi that you can imagine. I'm very grateful to have it, but that's all that's available for my area. So I do know that the video quality of what's coming through is not great. From my experience, the sound seems to be good. So if that's ever not the case, we will definitely address this. I can go to my brother's house and stream from over there. Not ideal. They have a couple dogs that live in there. So I'm hoping to make it work from home with the poor video quality, and maybe upgrade the internet when that becomes available. So there's that. The other takeaway that I had from last week's live stream was, in my astrology and coffee live stream, I think I took like 2 sips of coffee like the whole time. And I feel really called on my soul to rectify that. I think for me personally, it feels like part of my journey right now to like calm down and slow down enough to be able to take a drink of coffee. Because I feel like when I got off the live stream last week, it was like I blinked and it was over. It was such a trance of like, it just happened. And it was 2.5 hours and it just like poof, and it's gone. I'm like, whoa, where was I? Where was I for 2.5 hours? And so I think like grounding into my present moment and like being more present inside of this space, like, yeah, I feel very called to like slow down, sip your coffee. Like, it's okay. It's okay if you stop talking for 10 seconds so that you can have a sip of coffee. Yeah. You guys don't even know like how much of an act of self-love and like honoring yourself it is for me to stop talking long enough to have a sip of coffee, you know? Like it is one of those things where like it really forces you to look at like, why are you doing what you're doing? Like I personally have this whole thing where like every single thing is a spiritual experience. And this is one of those moments where it feels like the ability to drink my coffee while I'm talking, like the ability to have that balance between offering and enjoying and offering and enjoying. And it just, yeah, it feels really, really good. Um, and very relevant to look at us. I think we're going to start at the bottom again this week. There's just something about starting at the bottom and going up that just worked last time. And that is essentially where I'm at again. Like mentally here, starting this episode, is this Uranus stationing direct in Taurus. And that means that its retrograde period is over. And now it's going to go direct. So, you know, if you don't know what retrograde and direct is, like basically it looks like in the sky that the planet is moving backwards while it's going retrograde. And then when it stations direct means that it's going forwards again. And that's all just based on how we see it here from the planet. Um, the way it looks in the sky. Because yeah, I don't like to get into the technical stuff because personally, I think it's a little boring to like understand like how exactly everything works. If you want like a technical description of like retrograde and what it means, like in like astronomy terms, like the planets and how they move and the angles and all of that, go for it. That's just not my jam. So, gotta follow the fun. So, retrograde from a spiritual standpoint, from like an energetic standpoint, is all about like literally what the planet does. Like just as you even look at it, like it slows down, it stops, and then it moves back through where it's been, and it goes through its process, however long that is. Each planet has their own retrograde cycle, all of that. But like it moves backwards through where it's already been. And as it goes back, hindsight is 2020. Like as the planet goes back through, new revelations emerge, new understandings of past events. And like we see our own patterns emerging during those retrograde periods. And revolutionary. We understand things at a deeper level. We have new epiphanies of clarity that come to us. Retrogrades are like a gift, basically. And I'm going to come out of the gate like going right in the face of anybody who wants to say like, oh my God, beware, it's Mercury retrograde. Like these periods of slowing down, turning inward, going back through where we've been, taking stock, understanding things on a deeper level, that is a gift to the collective. So the people who have the hardest time during the retrograde periods, and this will be for Mercury that we'll get into and Uranus, is when you're trying to like charge ahead on some like script and schedule that you've set forth, and like charge ahead in the way that I need to do this, I need to get this done, instead of following your flow and following your energy, because our energy is lower during retrogrades. Like it's lower because it's drawing us inward. It's wanting us to take that time and to slow down and to reassess and to see what comes up and to be with that, like really give it the space that it deserves. Like these retrograde energies, they bring new understandings that are like, especially when we're talking about Uranus, like quantum leaps forward in your soul's evolution. Like not just like one step. Like these are quantum leaps. These are things where you end up in a time warp, and time is not linear. Like it took you 9 months to get here, and then that same amount of progress that took 9 months to do happens in a day. It's like that. It's like you didn't even know that that was possible. And so these retrograde periods, like the slowing down and the letting your energy kind of cave in on itself a little bit, and like taking some extra alone time, doing some extra journaling or meditation, like whatever works for you in your self-care practice, spending some extra time with yourself to be with those epiphanies, whatever they are. So that's my little, soapbox about retrogrades in general. When we're talking about Uranus retrograde, that's a really long time. Like this is a really long retrograde. That's not typical for other planets. It moves very slowly and it lasts a really long time. So like when Uranus goes retrograde, like it went August 19th, 2021, meaning that it had slowed down. And on that day of August 19th, 2021, it began its backwards movement. And it's now been going backwards from like 14 degrees of Taurus all the way back to where it is now, 10 degrees of Taurus. And so as it approached 10 degrees of Taurus, it slowed down. So it's been at 10 degrees of Taurus for freaking ever. Month, 2 months, 3 months, I don't even know. And January 18th, it will slow all the way to a stop and it will begin moving forward again. So that, oh, no worries. So that's super cool. The other thing that I will say about Taurus 10 degrees is that is So that's where Uranus has been as this whole retrograde has like slowed down to a stop, and it's like just sitting there hanging out for a really long time at 10 degrees Taurus. You got to wonder, like, do you guys have anything at 10 degrees Taurus or even like 10 to 14 degrees Taurus? Because that means that this retrograde, like, it's just on top of those planets. And so whatever houses that's happening in, that can just be really exaggerated when you have a planet that sits in that little spot on your chart. 10 degrees Taurus is where Betty White's midheaven was, RIP. So I found that yesterday when I made a video about Betty White's astrology. And one of the things that I talk about towards the end are the transits on the date of her passing. And on the date of her passing, there are so many transits that are happening on her chart, but one of them is this Uranus sitting on top of that 10-degree midheaven that she had. So like for the last several months, she's been having this. And Uranus in general, like, it breaks us free. It is a liberator. It doesn't necessarily like do our evolution other than breaking us free of the limitations that are standing in the way of our evolution. So that's like radical changes and like kind of like dynamite, like blowing up things that are just like standing in your way. Uranus is like a very quick moving energy, even though the planet itself like takes so long to transit a sign. It takes 7 years in each sign. So this Uranus and Taurus energy that we're in right now goes all the way through 2026. So we're like really not even halfway through these Uranus in Taurus vibes that we are now like at the end of this retrograde. What that means, bottom line, is all of that reassessment and like going back and reevaluating everything that happened. And now going forward, Uranus turning direct on January 18th, we have that understanding, and like basically sudden changes are on the docket. Like that's what's scheduled, is now that we have done this reassessment, that energy turning back forward, it's like there's this change that's ready to be unleashed. And me personally, I'm feeling this. Like the whole point of Uranus like breaking us free and Taurus being the fixed earth sign means that these two have a really interesting history together. So the last time that Uranus was in Taurus, it entered in 1934 and was there until 1941. So my US history sucks. My history in general sucks. Usually I find it boring, but in this case, when we're talking astrological history, I'm like right there for it. So I learned that that's basically the Great Depression. That's when that happened and led us up to World War II and all of that. Uranus, also, very random fun fact from Pam Gregory's video that I watched on this. Uranus is associated with wind. And when we're talking Taurus, we're talking like literally the physical earth plane, like the earth itself, the vibration of the earth itself. And so Uranus in Taurus has a very drying effect. And in 1934, I think, was like one of the worst years of the Dust Bowl in like across Kansas. I read a book about it when I was little. I don't remember the details. So like, it's so interesting to me how the astrological events can be tied to these kinds of historical events. So just a little bit of that. Like, I'm not a historian by any means. That's really not where the juice is for me, but just a little bit, because like that's really interesting. And basically this Pam Gregory video, you got to watch it. It's like 20 minutes long, and it's from, I think, 2018, when Uranus first took its first steps into Taurus, and then it retrograded back to Aries for a little bit. And then it got back into Taurus in 2019, in March of 2019. And then it's going to be there till 2026. And that is really interesting. You guys, I'm all over the place like always, but that's okay. I think it's okay. So that's really interesting, the March 2019 thing. And this is another like time machine. Let's go back and let's see where we were March of 2019. And really like those first few months after that, like that was really the the true initiation of that energy. When it stepped in 2018, I'm guessing we caught glimpses. I haven't like done a deep dive, like reflecting on this myself, but I think we caught glimpses about like, where were we disempowered? Where are we holding ourselves back? Where are we dissatisfied with our physical experience? And then when we got into March of 2019, it was like full force, like ready to revolutionize our world. Like, that's what Uranus and Taurus really wants. It's like we are breaking free of limitations from the past and we will build a new world. This is very interesting that Uranus and Taurus goes all the way through 2026, because when you're in the spiritual community, you hear a lot about 2026 and 2027, that like no matter what discipline these spiritual practitioners are coming through, they're landing at 2027. There is something that happens, and that's like the birth of the new earth, which, I mean, I'm like a practical person coming to this historically, and I'm like, interesting. And so Pam Gregory's video from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, she's talking about how Uranus and Taurus, like nothing will be the same. Like our whole entire world will evolve so rapidly, and we will just have this new earth at the end of it. And, 2 or 3 years ago, you're sitting there thinking like, how the F is that going to happen? Like the whole earth, really? Like radical revolutionize the whole thing in just a few years? Like, how does that even happen? Global pandemic. Holy shit. Like there was a comment on that Pam Gregory video that was like, yeah, I'm watching this from the future. And I'm just like, whoa, if you're not a believer in astrology before, you could go watch that video and just like, here's the pandemic. Here's the stress tests on every system that we have. Here is like us reevaluating so many things about our relationship with the earth itself. Like the Dust Bowl is a perfect example of that didn't just kick up. It wasn't like Uranus just came along and was like, let's blow some dust at these bitches. They were taking out the moisture conserving planets. They were plants. They were taking out like these plants that were holding moisture in the area, and they took them all away so that they could like do more industrial type farming. And because of that, now there's no plants, there's no moisture holding plants in the area, and now you have a dust bowl. So it's not the universe just like dumping a pile of crap on us. It's our own actions and choices that are being reflected to us, the consequences of our actions and choices being reflected to us. So during this time, I think it's fascinating that one of the side effects, and I know I always come back to this, I mean, I have an agricultural background. I don't know how many people know that. So I come back to the food system a lot. I find it, it's core to our survival. Call me crazy. But I find it crazy that this global pandemic, where there's this virus and it's all about healthcare and all of these things, meanwhile, there are food shortages galore. And that's scary. That's like a little scary, right? But it's the same thing. It's like there aren't just food shortages. It's not like the perfect system is like having this fluke flaw and how the hell did that happen? No. We centralized. We allowed companies to acquire other companies until there's only a couple of them left. And now when their workers, like when they have an outbreak of COVID and they have to close a meat packing plant, for example, those meat packing plants, they account for like 6 or 7% of that type of meat production. So closing one of them is a huge punch to the food supply chain. And we had tons of closures at the food processing level. So there was no food. It was not getting made because everybody in that facility, 3,000 workers, they had to send them all home for 2 weeks because half of them got COVID. Like there were so many of those, and we saw the consequences. We saw the empty grocery shelves. Like at one point there was no toilet paper. Like in the warehouses, in the company, like they were having to make more. All the toilet paper that was made, it was sold. Like there was no toilet paper. They were making more. That's why it took so long to get it back on the shelves. Like, holy shit, Uranus and Taurus, like we are here to have our foundations shaken. Like when we think about Taurus, we associate Taurus with money often, but really Taurus is about our sense of security and you think about money and security are obviously tied together. They go hand in hand. But the real point of Taurus is security. It's not money. And our relationship with money is one of those things that is being revolutionized with Uranus going through Taurus. Like, I did not know this. This is another piece of history from Pam Gregory. That lady, she is a wealth of information. Holy moly. So in the last time Uranus was in Taurus was when several large economies stepped away from the gold standard. And I didn't even like really know. I mean, I've heard that before, the gold standard. I didn't know what it was. Basically, it's the idea that paper money is backed by gold. So like if you like basically the value of the currency is equated to how much gold is backing it. So like the country itself possesses all this gold, and that is the backing for their currency. And that used to be how money worked, because money was new. It was a relatively new invention 100, 200 years ago, where like we used to trade things like, here's a chicken, can I have some milk? Like that used to be how the system worked. And then money came along. And when money was first invented, it was backed by gold. That's the gold standard. So the last time Uranus moved through Taurus, they stepped away from the gold standard. That means they can print as much money as they want, and they don't have to have anything that's like physically truly valuable behind it. And you know, not to get too much into like where we are currently politically right now, but basically like the national debt, like they've printed a lot of money in the last couple of years. And you think about that, like it's paper. It's just paper. There's nothing behind it. There's no gold behind it. There's no like real value behind it. And like that is a concept that if you grew up in the US like I did, like this is probably part of the privilege that we need to own. And this is probably part of what's going on is like, you know, especially if you weren't alive the last time there was a Great Depression, like our money is valuable. Our money has value. Like that's an assumption that we get to make. And that is the privilege that I'm talking about, because there are countries like freaking Greece, most recently, I think, like where, or maybe most notably and most recently, I don't know, where like their currency just like collapses. Like it just isn't worth anything anymore. And like there's like just bills, like paper money laying in the streets because it's not worth anything anymore. Could you imagine walking down the street by your house and there's just hundreds everywhere because they're not worth anything anymore? Like, you know, deep breaths as we move into this discussion. I'm talking to myself. I read this article on astrology.com that was very good, and I have that in the notes so that we can put that into the description box, that talks about just a really good overview of Uranus and Taurus, breaking down Uranus archetype and Taurus archetype and some different themes that are going to play out. And it was very good. I highly recommend you look at that. And at the bottom, there were recommendations for how to prepare for Uranus and Taurus. And I'm going to spend some time talking through these because I think this really grounds it into, like, a lot of this can sound like pure loss, like we're losing a bunch of stuff and things are falling apart and that's scary. And I get that. And it does. That's exactly what it sounds like. But the whole point of Uranus is that it's breaking us free from things that are holding us back so that we can more move into where we're meant to go next. Like Uranus is really only concern is that we fully individuate. That's all it wants. It wants us to be the individual self that our soul came forward to be. And for example, this is I guess when we get to the article here in a second, this is an example from Pam Gregory. She was talking about like you want to find like which houses Taurus is in your chart. And she had the example that like if Taurus is in your 10th house, so Uranus is transiting your 10th house. And it's like probably for quite a while, like You know, if you're bored to tears with your job, especially if you have Taurus in the 10th house, man, these people, they will stay in a job for a lifetime and they don't like it at all. But it pays good and I know how to do it. So, you know, it's like comfort zone, you know, comfort zone and security. And this whole Uranus in transit is like shaking up how we feel and define and find our security. So if you have Uranus in the 10th house and you're bored to tears at your job, how that plays out, and this is just example, every single house has an example like this. Let's say you just keep going to work. You just like keep going to this job where you're bored and you just don't like it. It sucks the soul out of your body, but you're still going because it pays really well and you know how to do it and you're already in there, so you just keep doing what's working. At this time, like we all have a decision to make about, we can either make the change proactively, we can recognize the life areas where we're settling, where it's not aligned with our values, like it just doesn't ring our bells, but we're doing it anyway because of these material reasons. We all have that going on somewhere in our world right now. And it is the time to ask yourself, like, what is truly valuable? What is truly valuable? And in Taurus, inner peace. Inner peace is what's valuable. Like Taurus rules over abundance, but remember, money is only valuable as a means to provide security. And security is necessary because we can't get to inner peace if we don't feel secure. So the whole point of all of this is that we find our way towards what's really valuable. We separate our self-worth from our material worth. And some of us have to get fired, basically, going back to that 10th house example. Like some of us won't let go. And then the universe will force the situation and we will be fired. There will be layoffs. The whole company closes. Like things happen so that you cannot continue to hold on to the things that you're doing only for material gain. That doesn't align with the heart of Taurus, and Uranus is here to like break us free from every single physical structure we built for ourselves that doesn't let us reach our own inner peace. It's like that's counterproductive. Like that, you know, a lot of times like we can build things out of the lower frequencies of Taurus, and then at a time like this, like we see, was that really valuable? Like, was that really the most valuable use of my time? Was that the most valuable use of my money? Was that the most valuable use of like how I spent my very finite energy in this life? And so if we're giving our energy away for things that are only paying us in money, the longer we stay in those situations, the more we're inviting the universe to just take it away from me. I can't seem to let go. So here, just take it away from me. And so many people, like my friend Lauren, she got laid off because like the company we were working for is stupid. And they were like, yeah, we're going to lay off like the bottom 10% of people because we want to improve profitability. Like we just want to thin the herd a little, like just God, thin the herd, just corporate America. Anyways, so she got laid off and she was one of those people that like had been there for 8 years. She hated it. They were never complimentary of her work efforts, no matter how hard she tried. So she just eventually gave up and was like suffering and whatever, but the job paid really well and she was already there, so whatever. And so she got laid off, and the company that we worked for gave severance packages to those people that they laid off. So they gave them like, I don't even know, it was a really good one, like $2,000 or $3,000 like per year that they'd worked there. So she walked away with like 30 grand and went back to school and got her physical therapist license, and she loves her life now. So it's like those things that come along where it's like the universe has to rip it out of your hands to get you to unclench around it. Some of that is like the best thing that could ever happen to you, you know? Like, and so as much of those kinds of life changes, like either we're approaching them willingly or we're taking it in stride when the universe forces a situation of change on us because we weren't willingly walking into it ourselves. All of it is good. All of it is Uranus liberating us towards our own soul's individual purpose. So that's like, It's really exciting. It's really terrifying, especially for Taurus placements, because like I said, we're talking about fixed earth energy that is as resistant to change as you can possibly get. Um, bless their hearts. They are so consistent. So consistent. That's like their superpower. So Uranus and Taurus is it's like volcanoes are more likely and like literal eruptions from the earth, because that is the only way to relieve the pressure. Like the earth is so consistent, and then every once in a while there's like this eruption of this pressure. Where'd that pressure come from? I thought it was consistent. Not quite, like, yeah, Taurus, their consistency can be both a blessing and a curse. And so especially if you have like Taurus placements or points early in Taurus, they've already really been activated. And if you have anything that's like 14 degrees and higher in Taurus, like 14 to 29, then Uranus hasn't been there yet. It's coming. Now that retrograde is over, it's starting at 10 degrees and it'll go back over 10 to 14, and then we'll move into new territory. So I personally have my rising sign at 0 degrees Taurus. And so that means like back in March of 2019 and a little bit the year before, like Uranus moved over my rising sign, which means it was also opposite to my descendant. I think it's really interesting to note that couple weeks before March of 2019, I broke up with my boyfriend at that time, and he was, got to like deal with all of that. And so all of that was going on like in March and April. And then in the middle of May, I met my current partner, who is a woman. And this is something that like liberating. Like I've known my entire life about, I don't know what I am. I know I'm not just straight. So there's that. I feel like I love energy. Is that a thing? Like I fall in love with people's energy, and their gender is just like doesn't really matter to me. And so I had never let myself step into that side of myself. I'd had that side my whole entire life for 30 years at that point, 31 years, I think, and never did anything about it, never let myself go there. And Uranus comes into Taurus, and here we are. Like within a few months, like here's my partner. We got together a couple months after that, and now we've been together for a little over 2.5 years. So it's like liberating us to ourselves. So I share that hopefully to like help us see that like the things that we have now, even though we may be attached to it, even though we may have like our entire, probably not likely, but like have so much of our self-worth coming from this attachment to this thing. And for me, that was like being perceived a certain way. Like I was terrified of what other people were going to think of me. I was terrified that my family would treat me differently. I just wasn't willing to be seen as anything other than straight, which I think is fascinating considering I'm talking about my rising sign. So that's exactly what that is like kind of how we put ourselves out there to the world. So then here's Uranus like on my rising sign going back and forth through that retrograde over the end of 18, beginning of 19. I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a ton of sense that like it was a revolution in how I was willing to be seen in this world. And what was truly worth it to me was to follow my true self and not worry so much about how other people perceived it. That like at this point, however long like into living it, I fully realize, maybe not fully, maybe that's the whole point of like we have, 4 more years of this, but I realize now like people's reaction to me is more a reflection of them than it is on me. But the way that I put myself out there, the way that I choose to show up in the world, that's on me. That's a reflection of me. And I was very much holding myself back because I wasn't willing to put this out there. And then here comes Uranus. And here's this person. What happened it wasn't like all of a sudden I decided in my mind, like, okay, now I'm willing to be seen this way. I find a relationship and I find this person who I love and who is special and who I'm just so grateful to have this relationship in my life. And a year into being with her, I was ready. I just like couldn't even hardly remember, like, why was I so against this in the beginning? Like, this is exactly what I've been walking towards my whole life. So yeah, it was liberating by almost drawing me into the real value. So I also think that like as we go through this whole like release of our old idea of what's valuable, we're also already well underway with receiving our new idea of what's valuable. Like already today, you probably have a completely different sense of values than you did back in 2019, 2018. So that's like always a fun thing to do in your journal is kind of go back and see like where was I at that time and how am I different now and what are the interesting things that have happened over this period. Um, yeah, it's always a good time for reflection. Basically, I feel like I need a coffee mug that says that. Like every single life experience is a spiritual experience. That's basically where I'm at this point. Let's see. Ooh, okay. So Uranus stations direct on January 18th, meaning the retrograde is over. The retrograde where we've been for like 5 months now, it's over. And we're ready to move forward again. Remember, that's now sudden changes. And the next day, January 19th, the North Node enters Taurus. And the North Node represents our soul's purpose, like kind of our soul's mission in this life, the energy that we came to walk towards and line up with, and all of that. Yeah, it seems very interesting to me that like this is just a big week in general. Like we're not even into the other two subjects yet because those are also happening within a couple days of this. This week feels like what does it feel like? It's like ooh, you bought the present, you wrapped the present, you know, you took all this time to get it to this point, and like this week and next week is like we're going to tie the bow on the present, and it's like the little bow on top, and that's what we're doing here. And it's big, it's real big, but like all the work is done, and it's just a matter of putting the finishing touches on it. And where we go from here is anybody's guess. That's the whole point of Uranus, is that it's unpredictable. So sudden unpredictable changes are totally possible come January 18th and onward, and it will have to do with these Taurus concepts around value and money and the earth and our feminine energy. So Uranus is technically it rules Aquarius. So Aquarius is a masculine sign, it's an air sign. Right before Taurus, Uranus came through Aries, and that's part of that astrology.com article that's in the description box where there is let's see, they talk a little bit about Uranus going through Aries for 7 years before. So that would be like what, 2011 to 2018, and the rise of the Me Too movement and toxic masculinity as a vocab word entered the culture. Basically, Uranus and Aries, we all were like breaking free of these old patterns of what masculinity looks like and kind of opening ourselves up to maybe a higher vibration expression of masculine energy. Because really, what masculine energy is courage. It's like bravery. It's a willingness to do something that you're scared to do. And that is huge. Like, that's a huge ability. And so many people want to appear brave instead of feeling brave. And I feel like personally, that's where toxic masculinity comes from, is that they're trying to, they're like lip syncing a song. Like the words don't match the music. Like when you're putting on a show of bravery, like that's not true bravery. Like that's, yeah, true bravery, true courage is quiet. And that's the highest frequency of masculinity, in my opinion, is that courage. And the courage to go out into the world, to face the unknown, and to trust yourself to figure it out in the moment and come out the other side. Um, that's beautiful. That's truly beautiful. But during Uranus and Aries, we definitely saw toxic masculinity, like these brute force shows of strength rising to the surface. And very interesting. I'm just connecting this in the moment, and I don't want to get political here, but Trump also got elected in 2016, and the first couple years of his I almost said pregnancy, his presidency were under that Uranus in Aries of like the rise of toxic masculinity. That's all I'm going to say about that. And then the last little bit of his presidency was under Uranus and Taurus, where we are now basically shattering the old world and we're going to build a new world. And again, you think about like the insurrection that happened January 6th of 2021 at the US Capitol. Like the old world is collapsing. Like it's happening. Like how Pam Gregory said, like Uranus, like the music has to play. Like we have to be liberated. And some of the current structures are only serving to hold us back. So the more we can lean in and trust that good things are happening, ultimately, like in the long run, the easier this time will be. And the more, this one is from Molly McCord, and the way she put it is that we are learning, I wrote it down. Hang on. Ooh, we're learning to be our own guarantee. So like we are separating our self-worth from our material worth, and we are learning to replace that material worth with an internal sense of worth that says, I trust myself to figure it out no matter what. I trust myself to survive. I trust myself to do what I have to do to survive. And that I am my own security blanket, like learning to be our own guarantee. That just, that feels so good. Like we don't need the security providing structures that we've cultivated in the external world as much as we think we do. And so that is perfect. That's gonna, yes, let's wrap up this one then. Going back to the astrology.com article, at the very bottom of it, it says how to prepare for Uranus and Taurus. So here are some tips to get you on the right track. And there are several here. There's like 8 or 9. So be just a bit as we work through these. So the first one is reevaluate your possessions. All of them. Get all Marie Kondo about it. Give away or destroy items that are holding you back spiritually, especially expensive items that you do not use. Consider what it would look like if you got rid of things that other people might think you'd be crazy to get rid of, like your car or your computer or your house. You might be surprised at what you learn. So, wow. Like, is anybody else feeling that vibe of like downsizing and like debt-free living? I've been seeing that everywhere. Like the idea of you don't have a mortgage, you don't have a car payment, you don't have monthly debt that you have to pay, and what that does to change your income requirements. Like, holy shit. Yeah, that's a big deal. And like, even as I'm sitting here saying this, I'm like, I drive my car like maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, like, because I don't leave my house, basically. Yeah. So I'm like sitting here thinking, like, do I really need a car? How much do I need a car? You know, at this point, like in this household, there's 2 cars, one for each of us. So like, is that really necessary? Considering I never leave my house? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. I'm also really considering my house because I really, really, really want to buy a bus and remodel it and live on the road. Put some solar panels on the bus, like just live like that and not have like a whole thing. But I love my house. So I don't know. I don't know where those chips are going to fall. We shall see. Okay, so once you downsize, once you like get rid of the things that you're not using, that you don't need, all of that, the second one is, and I love this, stop throwing good things away. Now that we have reevaluated our possessions, take deep and attentive care of the things you own. Patch items creatively and lovingly. When something breaks, turn it into something new. Learn to work with your own hands and move away from a disposable culture. And I love that so much because at the end of it, like having this disposable, just in time, always on the go, plastic for everything culture, we're treating our planet like it's disposable. And that is that starts invoking my inner warrior spirit that says like, no, 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 no. Like we need to cultivate something different. So part of this new earth is a sustainable culture, is like a sustainable relationship with our planet where we are no longer throwing away everything. Like I have become so conscious and I have just a teeny bit of guilt that I'm working through. But I love that I'm at least conscious of how many bags of trash are getting generated out of my household every week. And, like some of that's within my control, some of it's not. But it is interesting to just pay attention because it's so easy to think like, well, I just throw it away and I put the trash out and the trash man comes. Easy peasy. Meanwhile, the landfills are getting deeper and deeper and deeper, which, yeah, there's no like easy peasy solution for all of this. There's only individual choices of like how we each choose to show up in our lives and what we choose to spend our energy on. And this Taurus energy is about slowing down to the heartbeat of our planet. And you think about so much of that disposable culture is because we're go, 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 always on the run. Like everybody's busy, you got a million activities. Your schedule is packed beyond even it being fun anymore. And because you're so busy, you don't have time to do all the things that save the plastic from being thrown away. So yeah, we go through the drive-through. We have so many different little I mean, even at the grocery store where I own, like we sell the little grab and go snacks in the little single serve plastic containers. And like a little bit of that like just chips away. I'm like, stop it. No, don't do it. So, these changes of sustainability have been on the rise for a long time. Our awareness has been growing about this relationship that we have with our planet. And now with Uranus and Taurus, these sudden changes, these sudden liberations from doing it the old way and sparking a new way. Like this is the period. So, I mean, we still have 4 more years. So I think the change is only just beginning, as terrifying as that concept might sound. So Maddie added sustainability. Does that factor in here too? Absolutely. I think sustainability on all fronts. Like you think about like our planet and natural resources, they're finite. And most people run around here like they're not. And like, we can chop down the forest and we can mine the planet and we can drill and we can do all of these things. And none of that is sustainable. Like none of it. We need to stop harvesting trees for paper. We need to start using bamboo paper. Like that's one. We need to stop drilling for oil and install solar panels on every house. That's another one. Like all of these things that, we treat our planet like it's basically a landfill. And it's time to stop that. And it's time to take good care of what we have. And that is a planet that could use some TLC. It could use a break, a rest, a breather. While it recuperates, because if you leave areas alone, they go wild, like they grow over with new growth and trees and vegetation and animals and all of that. Like what we saw at the very beginning of COVID when humans were like all indoors and like there were animals in places where they had never been seen before. That's so cool. Like if we would get out of the way of our planet, it would heal ourselves. It would heal itself and ourselves for that matter, I think, because if we were living a slower lifestyle where we were still connected to the planet itself, we would have the benefit of all of that. We would have the benefit of those healing vibrations. Like the whole point of this universe, I believe, is that well-being is dominant. That like the solar system itself even existing and spinning in perfect orbit around this giant glowing ball of fire, like well-being is dominant. So when we slow down to the vibration of the planet itself, we know that same level of well-being that the planet itself is knowing, that like all is well. We fight so much for material security out in the world so that we can feel secure. And really, true security is about just connect with the planet. Like just go out in nature. Like put your hands in the soil, start a garden. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. We're in the recap here. My goodness. Okay, so that was the stop throwing good things away and like taking care of what you have and moving away from disposable culture. This next one is celebrate beauty. So reverse the rise of new beauty standards and relationships with gender. Let Uranus in Taurus liberate you from oppressive, rigid modes of viewing physical beauty and presentation. Practice beholding, displaying, and appreciating a variety of physical beauty. So that is so good. And Taurus in general is, again, going back to like the very heartbeat of nature itself. And I personally love the rise of like natural beauty, like there's no shade in anybody who is having plastic surgery or wearing makeup or like whatever. Like, I'm not here to talk about what anybody else is doing. But me personally, like I personally find natural beauty the most beautiful. So people who are glowing from the inside out and maybe their hair looks crazy, maybe, they have no makeup on, they got sweats on, ratty t-shirt, but they are glowing from the inside out. Like that is beautiful to me. And that has nothing to do with like how big your nose is or like what size your boobs are or anything else. Like I don't think I've ever talked about this. I can't say like, don't get plastic surgery, like don't have surgery to correct something on your body if there's really something that makes you uncomfortable. Like I feel like that's really, I don't know, you can't really run away from that and just pretend like it doesn't exist. It's a process all its own, like it's a spiritual journey all its own. And for me, that looked like coming from a line of women who were very well endowed in the chest area. And when I was like 14 years old, I developed these, and it was just uncomfortable from there. Like I felt out of place in my own body, and I just really did not like my body. And I tried to get my mom to let me have a breast reduction when I was in high school, when I was like 15 or 16. And she said, no, hell no. And so I lived with it for another few years. And when I was 20, I tried again. I went back to my mom because I was still on her insurance at that time and didn't have the money for the copay part of the surgery. She was going to have to pay for that. And I wrote her an email that time and explained my case as far as like why I needed to make this update. So I do definitely hold space inside of this whole natural beauty idea for the way that we feel inside our skin, like that's a lifelong process. That's not something that we can just like hurry up and heal. I am glad that like I did sit with my big boobs for like 6 years before I got my surgery so that I could like really clarify where I was coming from with that, what my goals were, what I was hoping for, like what was the point of getting this surgery. And having it done was like one of the best things that I've ever done for myself. So yeah, I mean, I can't say there's no room for surgery in helping us feel good inside our bodies, but I do think that Uranus and Taurus, it's getting us to look at, natural is beautiful too. Like it's it's really about the light that's coming out of us and not so much about what our vessels truly look like. Just like it's not really about the money itself, it's more about the sense of security. And if you're able to get that from something that doesn't even include money, then more power to you. And that's where, you know, this is another chunk from the Pam Gregory video, as far as there's a rise in people kind of going off grid and stepping away from mainstream society and going to compounds and little communities where they're growing their own food. They are having this little sustainable community where they have their own food system and everything else. And they're not relying on the mainstream systems. And especially with what we've seen in the last couple of years with COVID, like you got to think maybe these people are onto something. So it's all just food for thought as we have 4 more years of this energy playing out. Yes, the next one of these, when I finish these, I'm gonna have to take a break and go to the potty. So I have 4 more. Transform the way you eat. This can be something that is both luxurious and deliberate. We'll likely be seeing a worldwide shift in diet and food culture, perhaps even the long-awaited downfall of the agro-industrial complex, the modern day food system, as we focus on local, bioregional, sustainable, and indigenous food sources. I feel like that one just speaks for itself. The next one is start a garden. Even if it is just a planter box of herbs in your apartment window, take this opportunity to connect with this process of growing your own food. And really any amount of earthing. So like putting your hands in the soil, putting your bare feet on the planet. Yes, going out for walks in nature is hugely restorative, and like that connection with nature is there. It is like magnified times a million if your bare skin is actually touching the planet. The planet is putting off vibrations, and through the rubber sole of modern shoes, those vibrations don't ever reach us. And you can watch the Earthing movie if you want more about that, and how like basically the invention of shoes was one of the best and worst things to ever happen to the human population. So earthing, putting your bare skin on the planet, that's important. So this is a time to do that. The next one is investing in alternative economies. Prepare for the rise of cryptocurrencies and the potential of upheaval in the global financial markets. Begin to participate in barter and gift economies in your communities. With that one, I will say, again, just for a little bit of historical reference, I think this is interesting. So Uranus was in Taurus during the Great Depression from 1934 to 1941. And the Great Depression itself was caused by the Wall Street crash of 1929. And this is really interesting. And maybe you're thinking like, but Carly, the economy hasn't crashed. The Wall Street hasn't crashed since like 2008 when we had the Great Recession. So, you know, maybe this time is going to be better, and maybe it will be. And I'm not saying that it won't be. And I'm not saying that there is going to be a market crash during this time at some time. But what I am going to say is that over time, it is natural and balancing and harmonious for the market to go up and for the market to come down, and for the market to go up and for the market to come down. And right now, it is on the longest bull run in its history. It's gone up for longer than it's ever gone up in history. So there's that. The other thing is that I lost my train of thought, which means I obviously need a sip of coffee. My now cold coffee that's surprisingly still delicious. What was I going to say? Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. So the other thing, as far as like there hasn't yet been a crash in these last few years with this like Uranus moving to Taurus and all of that. Again, the Fed has printed a lot of money in the last few years, like a lot. So that money going into the economy and stimulating the economy essentially has like put on shock absorbers to the stock market, basically, where it's not the stock market is not reflecting the true economic pattern of what's happening, because every time we have a crisis, the Fed is like just putting out more money. And at this point, it is really catching up with us because there is inflation that is being felt. Like food prices have gone up 7 to 10% over the last year alone. And a lot of that is this inflation that exists in our country right now because so much money has been printed. The value of the dollar is going down every time they print more money. So going back to the gold standard, like now, I mean, there is no real value behind a dollar. Like we think, oh, but isn't it worth $1? Not really. Because like in 10 years, I mean, with the way inflation is going right now, it'll be worth about 75 cents thereabouts. Don't quote me on that. And that's only a prediction, right? Like, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like the value of money and Uranus and Taurus, like we're going to see a change. And the value of the dollar could theoretically, this is just how currencies work, could drop to zero. 0 cents. Like, it's not worth anything. Like I said, $100 bills laying in the streets. Like, could you picture it? I mean, I can in my imagination, kind of, but like in terms of what the world looks like at that point, I can't picture it. You know, the collapse of the dollar. Like, I'm not saying that's coming, but there is instability in the systems that we've built. And Uranus and Taurus is about showing us that, like, you're going to want to find your value in a sustainable place. And if you're sourcing your value in an unsustainable place, expect that to be disrupted. So where is it sustainable to source our value? From inside of ourselves, from learning to be our own guarantee, from valuing our creativity and our ingenuity and our ability to adapt and our ability to focus on what's truly most important and to let go of everything else. Like, we can survive no matter what. Like, that's, you know, you don't need a cushy environment to survive. You'll figure it out. And this is a time of like being shown how powerful and how valuable you really are. And a lot of us are missing that message because we're so caught up in the material world. So yeah, there's just bound to be a little bit of turbulence. And last but not least, separate your worth from your wealth. It is hard for us in a late capitalist society to do this. We were raised with the adage, time is money, but time is not money. Time is not anything except an arbitrary way of measuring our experience in a constantly changing universe. And while we're on the subject, I'm reading from this article. I love this author, whoever wrote this. And while we're on the subject, money is not anything either. It is merely an outmoded symbolic system that technology can easily replace as soon as we are ready to let go of the attachment to hierarchy. You are not your bank account. So this is, you know, just important to keep in mind as we come full circle on this Uranus and Taurus energy. We've been 5 months in this retrograde, and now we're ready to like move forward again and sudden changes again. And like we say, like that means like real physical things that kind of have to get out of the way so that the new change can come forward. And that can be a rocky ride. The more we clench and the more we brace for, I don't want the changes and I like the way it is and don't fix what ain't broken. It's my biggest pet peeve in the whole wide world, is it's more broken than you've been willing to admit. You know, that shadow side of Taurus of they'll stay in the shitty job for the rest of their life because it's comfortable. And Uranus and Taurus is like ripping away our comfy safety blankets and letting us prove to ourselves how capable we really are. Apart from anything that's going on in the material world, we have everything that we need inside of us. So I think no questions in the chat at this point. I am going to come back here in like 4 minutes and talk about the full moon in Cancer and Mercury retrograde. Actually, we're going to talk about Mercury retrograde first, and then we'll wrap up with the full moon in Cancer. These are intentionally long. I like it. I am a rambler and a long-winded storyteller, so I like leaning into whatever energy comes through in the moment. That is why after these live streams, you'll see that we go back through the descriptions. And when I say we, I mean Maddie. She's like a little wizard and like puts together this description that has timestamps throughout. So if ever you can't make it to the whole entire live stream, you can always catch the replay and use the timestamps to jump right to the section that you're wanting to see. And for those of you on the replay, we're also going to put a link in the timestamps for you to skip this break that I'm about to take. Otherwise, if you're here, take a little break with me and I'll be back at, let's see, it's 11:09. So I'm going to be gone for 4 minutes and I'll be back at 11:13. Okay. And some guy told me last time, girl, that I needed commercials. And I think that's a fantastic idea. And someday when I have fancy streaming software, I'm going to have commercials, but this is not that day. So for today, I have a sign that says I'm getting coffee and I'll be back in 5 minutes. Check it out. Let's there you go. Back in 5. Taking this and I'm taking this. Let us see here. Like so. Like so. And we're back. Hello. Coming to you live. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm drinking coffee. So much more successfully, light years more successfully than I was last week. So, I got that going for me. Not that I need to be chugging coffee, but I am. So there's that. So we just covered Uranus in Taurus, and this, like we said, is a 7-year transit. So it's a long-term thing. It's a big picture collective consciousness type thing. Uranus is a generational planet. It's affecting us all. So that's a bigger energy, bigger picture energy. These next two that we're talking about are much more localized to this right now point in time, where Mercury retrograde is really, like, we've been in the shadow period of Mercury retrograde for a couple weeks already. It went retrograde this morning and will be retrograde until February 3rd. And then we'll still have a couple more weeks of shadow after the fact. And shadow period just means that it's like a more subtle form of the energy. It begins to bring up kind of the point of the retrograde, in this case, Mercury retrograde. And like we talked about at the beginning with Uranus, retrogrades are points of let's pause and reevaluate, contemplate, reflect, go inward and tap into how's it been going? How's it working at this point? Like, how's life unfolding for us? And during retrograde, it gets a bad reputation for being a turbulent time and like, oh God, it's retrograde. But it's like, well, those are the things that we've let settle out of view, out of sight, out of mind. Like, you never really dealt with it, but you didn't resolve it. You just kind of let it fall to the side. And then in retrograde, it's like all that stuff kind of got to come back up. So that we can see it, because we want to know. We want to make an informed decision about how we show up in this world. And retrograde is very helpful in that it reminds us of what happened before. And this is also where I think it's very interesting. Another reputation that Mercury retrograde has, and I'm excited to see how it plays out. I haven't really paid attention before, but that exes can come back and like, you want to go back to the past and like relitigate it. Like, you want to get back together with your ex, they're calling you, like, however that shows up. Obviously, that's romantically. It can also happen like in business or work or whatever, like things from the past, like coming back up, and you get to react to it from where you are now. Like that situation of, your ex texting you like, hey baby, what's up? I don't know what exes say. I don't text my exes mostly. So there you go. So when they do that, again, this is from being in the astrology communities. It's like people really try to like get to the bottom of it and like figure out, like, is this a sign that I'm supposed to go back? Like, the fact that they're saying all the perfect things, like they're demonstrating all the growth I always wish they would have, and like all of that, like, is this a sign that it's time for us to get back together? Mostly no. Mostly it's the universe asking you if you know how much you've grown. Can you feel it? Do you know how much you've grown? Are you aware of it? Are you owning it? Because new you talking to one of your exes, when you've grown and you're conscious in your growth and like looking at where you are now and feeling your value and worth of where you are now, the thought of going back to an ex or like a long time ago, like, you weren't the same person back then that you are now. So it's interesting. It's a point of reflection. It's a point of, who was I before and what were the choices and things that I did before, and who am I choosing to be now? And Mercury retrograde, it also has probably the most commonly known reputation of all the retrogrades because it happens so often. Um, year to year, it varies just because it's not a set time of the year. There's a number of days between each retrograde cycle. So it goes back and forth between 3 Mercury retrogrades a year and 4. And this year we will have 4 of them. So even more time for going inward and reflecting on who we are now. Who have we grown into now that we've gone through whatever we've gone through? So over the last couple of weeks, I'm gonna like speak to kind of a mass consciousness vibration is what I think I'm feeling. And, I would love to hear in the comments like how much of this resonates, and do you have an example of this that has like been coming up in your own life? Because Mercury retrograde started today, and over the last couple weeks during this shadow period, we've had an issue come to the forefront of our mind. We've been feeling it for quite some time. We've known for a while that this, whatever it is that isn't sitting right with us right now, like it's been coming for a really long time. And nothing out of the blue is happening here. This is something that we basically have not had the clarity required to take action and move forward on this issue in a productive way. And there's no shame in any of that. It just is what it is. We've been where we were, and we were supposed to be there while we were there. And now we're here. Now it's Mercury retrograde. And we start with Mercury in Aquarius. And that Mercury, I know I'm not able to show charts here, which I think is okay, but forces me to talk about it one piece at a time. So Mercury is starting conjunct Saturn, and Saturn is a whole archetype that, like, obviously we're not going to get into all of that, but let's just say basically it represents the past. It represents like the current structures, which are already old news because what is manifesting in front of us vibrationally, that's the future. And so Aquarius is very future minded and very aware of humanity and what's good for humanity and how to direct our sense of who we are towards like everybody getting to live with like the most freedom ever. That's like Aquarius, high vibes of Aquarius. And Mercury conjunct Saturn in Aquarius is new realizations about our current structures and why they came to be and how they came to be and what they've produced in terms of benefits and damage. And we now have an understanding of how that experiment worked out. And that's all life ever is, really, is an experiment. So now with this Mercury retrograde period where we're going to start from that point, and Mercury's going to move back through the beginning degrees of Aquarius back into Capricorn, going to conjunct Pluto again. We already had this conjunction once, would have been like a couple weeks ago. And so we got a glimpse, again, this is kind of the beginning of the shadow period. We got a glimpse when Mercury first conjuncted Pluto of what this issue really is. What is it that is not aligned with who you are now? Like there's just such this feeling of like butterfly energy. That is how it just keeps coming to me. Like there's a caterpillar, and they go into this cocoon, this chrysalis, this process of change, this process of melting into goo and nothingness, and then becoming this butterfly in this formation process that happens inside the cocoon as the butterfly comes into being. And then the butterfly is strong enough that now it's ready to work its way out of the cocoon and fly away. And where we are right now in that whole evolution is the butterfly is formed, and it is now realizing that it's strong enough to come out of the cocoon. Talk about big. Talk about like, it feels huge to me. It feels like the before and after we've been walking towards for years, like decades and centuries as a society, like as a human race. Like this time, these few years of like, leading up to that 2026, 27 period of the new earth being born, whatever that looks like. This is another really, really huge step along the way, this Mercury retrograde, and really every Mercury retrograde, because Mercury is tied to our, like, the inner workings of our mind, the things that we focus on, the things that we're passionate about, the things that we're curious about. And it says a lot about how we express ourselves in words, whether that's through writing or talking one-on-one with someone, um, or doing something like this, where, right now, technically, I'm sitting in my house talking to myself, even though I can see there's people watching. So it's like that. Like, how do you express yourself? That's what Mercury is trying to help you figure out in your chart. And when Mercury goes retrograde, it's like the inner workings of our mind get a reset, get like a, let's calm the frenzy of, the go, go, go lifestyle that we as humans can get very wrapped into in the material realm. We can get so distracted in it. Mercury retrograde is like, okay, let's like detach from the physical for a little while and let's focus in on our thoughts. Let's like let go of what we're trying to control in the physical and let's just be inside our minds. And you'll notice that when you're pushing forward in the midst of a Mercury retrograde, when almost like you're in denial of your thoughts, like you won't go inward and you're trying to like push forward in the outward instead to kind of cover up what's happening inside of you, that's when everything like shit hits the fan. That's when like communication, like there's miscommunications, there's technology that fails, there's like all of these pauses, all of these deliberate little glitches from the universe that are trying to tell you you're not focusing where would be most beneficial to you right now. Like if your technology isn't working, if there's like, a meeting or something that you're trying to connect to on your laptop and all of a sudden your internet goes out, how do you handle that? That's a very simple example, but if it's an important meeting, then maybe that's a stressful situation and that's a stressful minute to ask yourself, like, maybe I wasn't supposed to be at that meeting. Maybe the path of least resistance and the path of most allowing is for that meeting to happen at a different time or not at all. Like the universe, these energetic glitches that come are divine guidance. They are not blocks in your path. They are not like stopping you from doing what you need to do. Like the glitches, so many people, and this is where there's so much out there around Mercury retrograde, around the pain of Mercury retrograde, because everything's glitchy and like miscommunications and like all of that. It's like, if you spend it inside your mind, if you spend it like doing what the time is there for, which is to kind of like do a reset on your mind and your thoughts, you've never met yourself at that deep of a creative level as during Mercury retrograde, when everything is illuminated inside your mind, new understandings, new ways of seeing things, new perspectives, new thoughts, new ideas, it's just like the energy is flowing, but you've got to be looking inward for it. And it's like when you look outward for it or for anything during that time, you tend to, like, the universe is like, no, don't be going outward. Like hang out inside yourself and focus on your internal creativity and do a little spring cleaning on the inside as much as you possibly can, like carve that into your life. Obviously, there's lots of things that happen. The Mercury retrograde technology problems. Well, and here's another fun thing. So like if you're born during Mercury retrograde, so like in your natal chart, in your birth chart, Mercury, the little planet, has an R next to it. That means that you were born during Mercury retrograde, as was I. And what that means is that you carry that energy for the rest of your life. You carry that energy where when you focus outwardly, when it doesn't serve you to your highest good, things glitch. Like it just doesn't work out. It just doesn't allow you to do that. It's almost like a form of divine protection. And knowing what I know about Mercury retrograde in my own natal chart, and then kind of like using these times to really turn inward and focus inward, um, it is truly magical. It's like the time I feel most like myself. And I think probably a large part of that is because I was born during Mercury retrograde. Um, Also, then a lot of times on my solar return, my birthday is June 19th, a lot of times it's Mercury retrograde. So, like this past year, my solar return chart has Mercury retrograde in it. So, it's like you're carrying that energy all the time. So, learning, I think, if anything, it gives you a leg up during actual Mercury retrogrades to understand that, like, what's meant to be will be. And if you're having technology glitches that prevent you from doing what you need to do, then it was never meant to work out like that anyway. And that is divine protection. That's like the universe, kind of like the current, the undercurrent of the universe guiding your canoe over here instead. Because when you can't do what you need to do, something else happens. Like, you don't just stop existing because you didn't do what you needed to do. There's something else. And my best example of this, and I don't even remember, I think it was Mercury retrograde when this happened. Maybe not, but like I said, like I had Mercury retrograde in my solar return chart. So I was somewhat, and my natal chart. So I'm somewhat carrying that energy all the time. But basically what happened was uh, I had a reading from a medium named Lori. If you want her contact information, I'll give it to you. She is wonderful. Um, she did a mediumship reading for me where she channeled first my Aunt Deb, and then my Grandpa Joe and my Grandpa Cecil. And that was a whole thing because, like, they're the same soul, but they split into two humans and came, and like one of them was my grandma's dad and one was her husband, and like all of this divine protection that's at work in my lineage and all of that. And then she channeled, like, some other religious figures through time. And it was powerful. It was just like so powerful that shortly after that, it was like maybe a couple hours after, my internet went out. And through troubleshooting, which meant, I mean, I work from home and I do Zoom mostly for my work. And no internet means no Zoom. My phone coverage out here is not good enough to do that on my phone. So without Wi-Fi, like, I'm a sitting duck. So 2 hours after I get this powerful message from Lori, my internet blows out. And through the troubleshooting, we find out that the router itself is burned out and they need to give me a new router. And that's going to take a couple days. And so they give me the new router and I plug it in, and it does not fix the problem. And that's how they found out that, oh, it's not the router, it's this cord. So now we need to send you a cord. So that takes 2 more days. So I was without internet for 4 days, which meant I had to cancel all my work, all my events, all my everything. And I just sat in my house then for 4 days and processed and sat with and implemented and integrated and worked through this gigantic fucking message that Lori gave me. And it was 4 days before my internet got restored. And so you look at that, and I could even go so far as to say, like, when I have to cancel sessions and move them and all of that, that's money, like I'm now losing out on money, or I'm having to like make certain days heavier or whatever. It's not about that. Like, the energetics of this life, of like our life experience, are really what is the most important. And Mercury knows that, like, at a deep level, our thoughts create our reality. And when we just leave our minds unchecked and we get running on the hamster wheel and not really questioning what's going on in our lives, when we're just running full speed ahead and not paying attention, that's when you run off a cliff. So Mercury retrograde is there to like help you take stock of like your mental state and what's going on the inside, and how's your self-care doing, how's your overall energy feeling, and to spend some time with yourself and your new understandings. And that's where I want to flip to this part where, so right now, as Mercury goes retrograde, it is making an almost exact square to Uranus in Taurus. So we just talked about Uranus and Taurus. It's at 10 degrees of Taurus. And Mercury is at 10 degrees of Aquarius. So they are making an exact square between the two. And Uranus is said to be the higher octave of Mercury and rules like sudden breakthroughs of brilliance and clarity and like instant downloads of intelligence, like ideas that are fully formed and fully researched and productive. And like, this is exactly what you need to do. And it just lands in your brain all at once. That's Uranus. And Mercury is the inner workings of our mind. So when you have a square between Mercury and Uranus, you have your mind square your higher mind. Like, and a square aspect is, it's another one of those areas in astrology that I like to pick on a little bit, that there's this preconceived idea in some circles that squares and oppositions are bad and trines and sextiles are good, and like these are easier energies and nicer energies and these are bad energies or hard energies. And really what that tension does, that square, the tension is what it gives you. It makes the status quo like just not very comforting, basically. Like, it's like you need the next level. You are ready for the next level. Like I said, this whatever you're dealing with, like whatever fault like this is for you, it's been coming for a while. And you can narrow in on which area of your life this retrograde is happening by looking at like where are the early degrees of Aquarius, so 0 to 10 degrees of Aquarius. That's where retrograde is starting. It's moving backwards through those degrees right now. And then on January 25th, it'll enter Capricorn. So it'll move into like 29 degrees of Capricorn. And then on February 3rd, it stations direct in Capricorn and starts moving back through the end of Capricorn. So that's where it goes over Pluto to make that conjunction, and then it stations direct and it goes back over Pluto. So where is that part of your chart? Where is the end of Capricorn and the beginning of Aquarius for you? In what house is what I mean by that. And mine is in the 10th house. So in the 10th house, I have my midheaven in Capricorn. So all of this Mercury retrograde, it's so funny because my 11th house starts at 11 degrees of Aquarius. So like literally Mercury went as far as it could inside my 10th house. And now we're going to back it up and like do all of that again. And then we're going to go again. And that is where my thing is coming up, is inside of my career, inside of my legacy, if you will. Like, what is truly worth it? Like, Capricorn as an energy wants to know, like, what is your ultimate goal? Like, if it took you your whole life to climb a mountain, so you could only climb one mountain in your whole lifetime, which mountain would you climb? That's what Capricorn energy kind of boils down into, is like, what is your life's work? What's your great work that your soul came forward to leave in the physical realm? Not some lofty idea of what you're going to do, but like a vision of like, what are you actually trying to build? And so Mercury in this retrograde and the inner workings of our mind, like going through Aquarius, the humanitarian, and Capricorn, this like goal-oriented, like gonna live out our great work. This upgrade, especially when you factor in the square between Mercury and Uranus that we're starting with, like these are sudden breakthroughs in whatever issue that you're facing right now. Basically, the prescription is to kind of sit with it over the next month or so, month to 6 weeks, while this retrograde is playing out during the shadow period of the retrograde. Like, just kind of be with this thing that's coming up for you. And for me, I very much am feeling this urge to like break free. I want to break free. And I see what I think that looks like for me, the path to freedom. I think I know what it is. And basically, the idea of this time period is that no, you don't. No, you don't. If you sit with it for this like 4 to 6 weeks, the path to freedom on this issue is going to look completely different. You will have a completely different vantage point, and that is for reasons like going back into like Mercury conjunct Pluto. Pluto, just like what we talked about last week with like Venus retrograde and conjunct Pluto and all of that, Mercury conjunct Pluto is like a deep dive into the inner workings of our mind. and sussing out the toxic crap that we keep in there. And like, let's get rid of it once and for all. Let's get rid of those things that are only preventing us from creating our great work in this universe. It brings in a deeper knowingness. It is basically moving us essentially to a much higher frequency. So when you think about like when you have your inner workings of your mind full of toxic crap that you've just let settle in there, and myself included, like it's an eternal process of letting go of those things. But whatever is going on inside our minds, that's what our reality reflects to us. So during this Mercury retrograde, like we're going to get to dive deep into the inner workings of our mind and what is working in there, what's not working in there, and let go of some of those things that are not working for us. And you think about if you let go of those, now your life is a reflection of your inner workings of your mind, and it's not full of all the toxic stuff. There's only good stuff in there. At least, the ratio of good stuff to bad stuff is more skewing in the favor of good stuff. So yeah, this also is very cool. So let's see, Mercury square Uranus. This also happened in the middle of 2020. And basically like this square and this Mercury retrograde, and then like going back. So like it'll square Uranus again after retrograde is over. So like probably the middle to end of February. And so that's going to happen again. And that this is that closing of that process that was started mid 2020. So tell you just a real quick story here from my timeline. Basically mid 2020 was when I got mad and put my little foot down and demanded that we transition managing the grocery store to someone else. I was the full-time manager up until that point for like 3 years, and I was just mad and done. And I put my foot down and we transitioned management then over the next few months. And since then, over these last 18 months, then this last year and a half, it has been like a continuous stepping back, a continuous like untangling myself, detangling, whatever the word is, myself from the energetics of this business. Like somebody else is managing it, somebody else is running it, and yet I'm still energetically very connected to this business that I basically gave birth to for 4 years. All the pain that went into that, like I birthed it and it exists now, but now it's under somebody else's management. They are self-sufficient. I don't go there. I don't have to continue with my physical life force. I don't have to continue pouring my life force into it for it to keep going. And in fact, I think it's almost counterproductive for us to do that. Like this is another one of those kind of like the Uranus and Taurus, like this is an ending of something that's not working for us anyway. And it's like a long overdue thing that we've been kind of like getting along because we had this idea in our mind of what things had to look like. And then here in this Mercury retrograde period, we're shown a completely different vision for how it could be. And all of a sudden, our path to freedom is over here. So, sitting with whatever it is, like me wanting to break free, in my career space or whatever, like right now, I think that looks like this. And already over the last couple of days, so the end of the shadow period, we're not even into Mercury retrograde, already I'm seeing not necessarily other pathways, just that I have a general sense that there are so many other ways that this could play out. And that if I don't rush into demanding that, like, this is how I'm going to do it, that, like, something even better, the universe is orchestrating an even easier and even more peaceful and even more productive path to get to what you want. And in this time, like, it's just a time for like inner work. Like we're still in Venus retrograde for a little while, and through the end of January, I believe. And now Mercury retrograde. And it also just seems really interesting that like there's almost like this handoff between, Uranus stationing direct on January 18th and Mercury going retrograde on January 14th. It's like this exchange of energy. and now Mercury's going to carry it and then bring it back over. Like it just, it feels so good. Divine timing. That's really what I'm getting at. So let's see if there's anything else on Mercury retrograde that we want to talk about at this point. Oh yeah. So this is a good time for kind of like what we did before. When this happened in mid 2020, when Uranus and Mercury squared and like this all began, right? So like that's my timeline. Maybe you have one too of what started to happen last summer or things started to shift last summer. And just kind of like even chart out. I'm giving this to myself. I'm going to do this because chart out like a timeline of your evolution over these last 18 months. And I think we'll start to get a sense of this time warp, quantum leap style evolution of what is about to happen. Like you think about how far you've come in the last 18 months and how we talked about like on my YouTube channel is a perfect example of like it took me like 9 months to get 100 hours of watch time racked up on my YouTube channel videos. And then yesterday I had 109 hours in one day. So it's like that. It's like things can change so fast, and this evolution process, it is linear sometimes and sometimes it's not. And this is one of those windows where it is not linear. Like we are jumping into a new space where the momentum, like you're going up in a really quick way. And that's that Uranus piece of like sudden rapid changes. So we start Mercury retrograde with this square, and then it'll go through this whole process over these next 6 weeks. And then we'll have this square again at the end of February. And that is the close of who you used to be. And then we enter March, right? Like now it's March, and towards the third week of March, the sun moves into Aries, and that's where it feels like, I mean, new life anyway. Aries is cardinal spring, like that's springtime, and there's this like just rise of energy on the planet as a whole. But it's more than that. It's like, it's bigger. It's like these whole 2 years of this pandemic and like everything that we have gone through in these 2 years, all the soul searching, all the self-reflection, all the hard times that have shown us our current reality, like the limitations of our current reality. And now it's time to shed a lot and move beyond the current reality, move beyond like what used to be possible. Like this is a window, an opening into something more than that. And right now at the beginning of Mercury retrograde, like we really don't get to know like that full picture. So this is one of those fun moments where astrology helps you practice your faith muscles, your trust muscles. like when especially when you have a lot of stuff coming up inside of you, it can be really difficult to think like, yep, this is divine timing. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be right now. Like it's so easy to think like I'm doing it wrong, or this is too much. I don't want this. I don't like this. To resist against it. And I'm going to say like, this is a time, this next week, especially because of the Cancer full moon, we'll pivot there in just a minute. But also just these next couple months in general, that like, I'm gonna say like what it feels like is like we don't even have access right now to who we're going to be, what our life is going to look like in March of this year, 2 months from now. So a good bit of rest and relaxation and doing the turning inward thing and the taking stock thing and being with yourself and clarifying who you are and what matters to you and all of that. Like that, this is a perfect time for that. And that all of that work then will serve like in this March, like this really huge influx of momentum to whatever you got going on. Like all of the release that we have done over these last couple years and these next couple months as we bookmark it, as we like bookend it, is what I meant. Um, it's one of these feelings like when I was leaving Dallas after 5.5 years and I was going to move back to Kansas to start the grocery store. And even before I knew where I was moving, I could feel my time here is coming to a close. And then I found out that, okay, yeah, we're going to do the grocery store and I'm moving to Kansas. And now there's a date. There's like a real date that, like, oh, okay, so now I have 2.5 months left to live in Dallas. So about the same amount of time. And it was crazy. Like, I looked at everything so differently because I knew this is the last time that I'm going to see this through these eyes. Like, this chapter of my life is closing. And instead of resisting it, instead of like being sad or anything about what I was leaving behind or scared about what I was walking into, I more like slowed down and I took more pictures and I just breathed in the air. I listened to the sounds. I was present in this reality that I knew I'm never going to get to be here again. You know, even if I go back to Dallas, it's not the same. Even if I was to move back there and like build another life there, like it wouldn't be the same. It's not that energy. I'm not that same person. And this feels like that. This feels like an opportunity over the next couple months to realize that, like, energetically speaking, you're not going to live here anymore. Come March, you're moving. You're moving to a new energetic residence. So really, really soak up and appreciate where you are now and be with it as fully and as presently as you possibly can. And then you'll have those memories when you leave and you're living somewhere else. And you know, you can't go back to where you were before, and you'll be so grateful that you have those pictures, that you have those memories of those present moments, and really soaking up. There's this Macklemore song that I love that is called Good Old Days, and basically the concept of the song is that I wish I knew the good old days were the good old days while I was living them. And you know, when you look back way down the road, it's so easy to see like, oh, good old days, like whatever. But how often do you live your good old days while they're happening? And this is a time of that. Like these 2 months, like it's not like Mercury retrograde is slowing everything down and there's nothing to do. There is something to do. It's called being present with our right now reality and basically saying goodbye, like really being with it in a closure kind of way. Because life is about to be very different. So that is all very exciting. Yeah. Let me think for just a second as I switch gears here into the Cancer full moon, which, like I said, like, you know, this Mercury retrograde is happening over the next 3 weeks and then shadow period for 2 more weeks. The Cancer full moon, however, is January 17th of 2022, so here in just a few days. And already I can tell you that we are building, like in the, especially the last phase of the moon, right before it's full, like the energy is coming in. So it's so funny because I'm already seeing it. I'm getting reports, and I'm all up in my own emotions. Um, so Cancer full moon. Oh, let's just start by saying that the moon rules Cancer. So the moon is most at home in Cancer. And a full moon is kind of a culmination point. It's a release point, it's a turning point, it's pivotal energy of something that's been building and it comes to fruition. And then in your life, that thing has come to fruition. So naturally, things are a little different, just depends on what it is. So full moons and new moons, they work in tandem with each other, where like the last new moon in Cancer was this past summer. July 9th, 2021 was the last time we had a new moon in Cancer. And the things that we set in motion July 9th, 2021, and really like that whole week, that whole month, like all of that has been building and building and building and building until now. So this is the culmination of the last 6 months. Whatever new intentions you launched in July have been building to this point. So that's kind of a new moon, full moon relationship in general. Again, with Cancer being the sign associated with the moon, the emotional side of this building and new intentions and release and all of that is just amplified. So basically, this Cancer full moon is scheduled to be a tidal wave of emotions that run through mass consciousness. And essentially, like, we're all going to be up in our feelings, which is really interesting considering Mercury retrograde just started, and it is really not the time to be trying to hash things out with other people. And yet this rush of emotional energy, this full moon in Cancer, is like that light of the full moon is illuminating our emotional energy down to its roots. So anything where, Cancer, the shadow side, can be pretty passive, can be kind of non-confrontational and even passive aggressive. Like if they do need to assert themselves, it's more likely to be passive aggressively than directly. So we all have that side of our personality, that Cancer side of basically our innermost, most tender little heart, like our emotions. Like Cancer is associated with the crab, and that's like, that hard outer shell protects something that's very tender on the inside. And Cancer is also just kind of like, as part of the water family, it's where we feel our feelings. It's our own emotional receptivity. So if we feel like, when we have big emotions, typically, this is kind of a typically, not the full moon, but typically when we have big emotions, we either kind of push them back down or you just kind of set it off to the side, like meaning you focus yourself on other things. And when you do that, naturally, emotions, how it works is like the dust will settle on that thing. Like if you just leave it over there and like go do something else, the dust will settle. Most of us, though, depending on your practices in your self-care, most of us let the dust settle and we just leave it over there. You just like, don't go back. Just don't look at that. Like, it's just over there. It's not even a factor anymore. The dust settled. It's fine, right? It's totally fine. Sure. Sure. And then the Cancer full moon comes around, and now your emotions are illuminated to their roots, and every speck of dust that you've ever let settle is about to get kicked up in your face. So it's said to be a bit intense. This is honestly my first year, like paying attention to the new moon, full moon cycle long enough to like have a basis of where I was in July and what I've been building and all of that. So, um, and it's really interesting, actually, where I was in July was coming off of a 3-month hibernation in my bed, binging Netflix. That's mostly what I did. And in July, I relaunched myself and my spiritual work in a new way where I was no longer so much concerned with my productivity and how many things I was doing and how often I was doing things and all of that, how many hours I was putting into it. I was more concerned with how gentle I was being with myself, how enjoyable my work practice was, and um, yeah, just like how good I felt in the middle of my spiritual practice. Because what had happened was I had been doing my spiritual work for like 6 months after backing away from the grocery store. And at the beginning of my 3-month hibernation, I was burnt out. I was burnt out on my spiritual work. Like, what? How does that even happen? Well, shady work practices is how it happens. Like, I was being a slave driver to myself because that's where my conditioning was. That's where I had been programmed, and that's where I was, like, going into the beginning of my spiritual work the first time, like, back in October of 2020, and I burnt out because my work practices themselves were flawed. My burnout that I had always thought was my job was, working at this software company, the culture, like you got to work 65 hours a week minimum and 70 or 80 on the busy weeks. And I'm like, that's why I'm burnt out, because they expect me to do that. And then I opened my own business and I got burned out at that. And then I start my spiritual work where I'm working from home. I'm home 24/7, connecting with others via Zoom. So, like, physically, I'm not even soaking up anybody else's energy. Only intellectually, I soak up their energy as I talk to people through Zoom. Um, and I'm still burnt out, like WTF. And so I hibernated from like February to July. And then I reemerged in July and I had a new lease on what even was the point of what I was trying to do. And I recentered in, I'm not really even doing spiritual work out in the world. I'm more living my own spiritual path. I'm living my own healing journey, my own self care journey. And then whatever inspiration comes out of that is extra and bonus. And that was my new mindset about work then, my spiritual work over these last 6 months. And so I'm excited to see like what these next few days bring. Um, I also think it's interesting that leading up to this full moon a few days ago, I finally watched a TV show that was recommended to me, Queer Eye on Netflix. And this is like a revamp of the original Queer Eye for the Straight Guy that was on TV way back when. And the Fab Five, they do like a whole life makeover on these guys. And just like more than give them a new wardrobe, they like rebuild their confidence and their self esteem. And I watched the very first episode called You Can't Fix Ugly. And they were able to break him of believing he was ugly by the end of the week because he could see his own light shining out from inside of himself. He was confident in him, in his whole self. And they were able to create that. And you better believe I bawled like a baby, like sobbing, like out loud with volume. Oh my gosh. It was so, it was so uncomfortable and exactly what I needed. And basically all of that to say, like, I think this Cancer full moon, tidal wave of emotions, all of our emotional energy, like rising to the surface, um, crying is probably going to be part of the next several days slash week. Um, and really, like, even just looking at our experience, like, Cancer is our ability to feel our feelings. So when we are in big emotions, how do we handle that? You know, you don't have to cry, but it is worthwhile, especially since we're in Mercury retrograde, to be kind of like in that self observing mode of what is your mental reaction to these big emotional waves that move through you. And bigger than that too is like, what is your relationship with your emotions and your emotional release? Because as Maddie put it this morning, like there is a healthy cry that comes out. Like there's those tears, they melt tension, they melt energy, they like, you know, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change forms. And when we carry that toxic energy inside of us that like weighs us down and skews our perspective of the world and of ourselves, when we cry, we're like melting that toxic energy and it is changing forms from this block inside of us into the tears that are rolling down our face. So, like crying, it's really interesting. I have a not so open relationship with crying where when I feel tears coming, my instant kind of gut reaction is to push it back down. So I'm actively like as I watched Queer Eye, like I was seeing that in myself that like as I was beginning to like kind of well up with these like heartfelt happy tears, I like was pushing it back down. And I'm like, why? Why do you want to do that? Like these happy tears, they're happy. Like it feels really good. It's intense happiness coming out in the form of tears. Why am I pushing that back down? And that was a very interesting question. And by the end of the 40-minute episode, I wasn't. I was all out howling, like I said. So can't recommend that enough. Open that gate, especially Cancer full moon. The more we release during this time, the clearer our pathway going forward will be. And the more like, I genuinely think that this whole idea of Mercury retrograde, where we have this thing that's come up in our lives in whatever area of our life, you know, beginning of Aquarius and end of Capricorn, whatever house that's in, there's this thing in our life that has been coming a long time. We're wanting to work through it. And this Cancer full moon, this release, this transmuting of this energy that's been inside of us for who knows how long. We're transmuting it into probably tears, um, tears or writing or like release ceremonies where you write out like a whole thing, like telling whoever whatever you need to tell them for closure. You don't ever actually send it, you burn it. And like release ceremonies, however you can transmute, move that energy out of yourself and let it go. There's so many ways you can do that. The more we do that, it's like that is what's helping that Mercury retrograde to see this whole other path, because we're releasing these toxic energies that are only standing in our way, that are only serving to block our viewpoint of what's possible. They're holding us back. They're keeping us stuck and seeing ourselves in the world in a certain way that's just not true. And so during this Cancer full moon, those illusions that we're having right now about the way the world is or about the way that we are, they're about to melt and fall away. And at that point, you have clearer vision. You have more clarity about what's really true, and not just what's true, but what's true for you. What's really true for you. And this is really interesting. So this is where we can kind of combine this Cancer full moon and Mercury retrograde to say, like, going into Monday, which is when the Cancer full moon is, and Mercury retrograde is already known for bringing the past back, like bringing exes, bringing the past back to life, if it will. Like if you were like bringing it back to life in your experience, right? It's been over here doing its own thing, and all of a sudden it's right back here. And this is like not only a time for people wanting to apologize to us, but a time for wanting to apologize to others. Like when that dust that has settled, when that all gets kicked back to the surface, it's like we feel the guilt and the regret of the things that did not go the way that, like, it now in hindsight, looking back, we're just sick about it. We're just sick that that's how it went, that like we treated our kid like that, we treated our partner like that, we treated our whoever like that. And we're realizing that like we messed up. We did it wrong. Like, holy shit. Like, I never should have done that. And so that guilt, that like regret rises to the surface. And that is what starts that like reaching out to your ex or reaching out to your parent or your kid or like whatever, where you feel like you need to mend broken fences and like make it right. And it's really not about that. Like, it's your healing journey. I'm not saying that like don't apologize or like don't, if you feel like you need to make amends or like need to do something, like do what you need, do what you feel like you need to do for your own healing journey, but have no illusions about mending fences. Like, this is not about that. And if you're wanting to apologize to someone so that you can like have them back in your life and you can have a fresh start and like have a blank slate in your relationship, that's likely not the point. Not to say that it's not still okay to apologize and to say what you need to say for the sake of closure, or like I said, even just write it out and do a release ceremony of some sort. Um, so, again, Mercury retrograde is known for miscommunications, and most of the time that is because those communications never should have happened in the first place. If you're having a lot of miscommunications with people during Mercury retrograde, you're talking way too much. You can't have miscommunications with people when you're doing your own introspective crap. So, like, that's kind of the takeaway. And especially with this Cancer full moon in the mix, like kicking up all of our shit. Yeah, the urge to reach out and want to fix things from the past can be strong. Cancer is a very nostalgic sign, very sentimental when it comes to the past and emotions of the past. We can hang on to things, and this is a time to let go. This is a time to like focus in on our own healing journey, our individual process. And that may mean that something with someone else rises to the surface to be sorted through, but it's for you. It's still for you, even if it has to do with somebody else. So as you may venture out and connect with others, like that you feel like you need to do that to work through this process for yourself, just keep that in mind, that like those conversations are for you, and don't get so caught up in what they say, because, you know, a lot of times like we have this epiphany where we realize, like there was something just yesterday where somebody's telling me a story about somebody realized something that like about their oldest daughter and how they have this in common with their oldest daughter. The oldest daughter is like late 50s. The mom is in her 70s. So like this realization has been 5 decades in the making, and like her first instinct was to call her daughter and to be like, "Hey, I just had this realization and this is so cool and we have this in common." Mind you, they have very little to no relationship, and the mom is thinking like, "Oh my God, I finally see, like, I finally have compassion for my daughter. I understand and have more compassion for her struggle now. And so I feel better equipped to have like a loving, compassionate relationship with her. So like let me call her and let me mend this fence." And she didn't, thankfully. But it's those kinds of things where if that kind of stuff comes to your surface, chances are the epiphany that you had about like having more compassion for someone and wanting to go back and like make amends and have a relationship with them, it's just for you to have closure and for you to learn something. It probably isn't so that the relationship can restart. This Cancer release is deep and powerful, and between that and Mercury retrograde, like promising this whole different future, like really forward. Forward is the only direction we want to go at this point. Like when the past comes back, which it will over this last week, it is for us to react to it from who we are today, from where we stand today. It is not necessarily a sign that we're meant to go backwards into old energy. There is so much new energy coming into our experience, and the more we can welcome that, the more we can do these releases and lean into our emotional experience, no matter how like uncomfortable that is likely to be. I feel for anybody who has a public facing job over this next week. Holy moly. For any of you who are watching, if that's you, or if you are someone who is going to be out in public over this next week, please be compassionate to every soul that you meet. This energy is huge, and most of humankind, bless their sweet souls, have very few emotional coping skills. So as we go through something uh, like a Cancer full moon, especially during a Mercury retrograde, where the whole point is to show us like where is our own mindset holding us back, it is bound to be an eruptive time. It's bound to be a very emotionally tense time where there's lots of outbursts, and people, you can understand a public emotional outburst as this person has next to no emotional coping skills. So rather than letting them draw you into their space and their frustration and their energy of not knowing how to ride this tidal wave that's moving through, this Cancer energy, this Cancer full moon energy is about really grounding down deeply into our own emotional experience and what we know to be true for ourselves. And if anything, drawing others into our calm instead of letting them draw us into their chaos. So that's kind of hopeful, inspirational, a little bit, maybe, coming from someone who, like I said, very rarely leaves her house because it's crazy out there. It's bananas out in the world at this point. And me, myself, and I get along just fine most of the time. 99% of the time, yeah, we're like this, hanging out in the house by ourselves. Not by ourselves. The dogs are here too, and they obviously got the big personalities and all of that. So let's see if there's anything else on this Cancer full moon that I want to mention. On the Cancer full moon, this is from my notes, it is on the same day that the sun is conjunct Pluto, and that sun conjunct Pluto is happening at 27 degrees, and that'll be opposite the full moon happening at 27 degrees. So really to like go fully into like this emotional release and like this toxicity from inside ourselves that we're like letting melt out of our faces as tears, never ending tidal waves of tears. Um, this transformation is being like, so a full moon is always when the sun is opposite the moon. So like always you're releasing on the moon end so that you can like be even brighter on the sun end kind of thing. And the sun is like the center of our personality, the center of our personal solar system in terms of like, this is the gift that we came to share with the world. And the rest of our energy is kind of like helping to support and put up that sun so that it can go out in the world and share what its gift is. And it is unique, however, to have Pluto right there with the sun, where the sun is then like coming conjunct with Pluto is illuminating like the deepest, darkest recesses. Our underworld is what Pluto represents. So, like, the sun is lighting up our underworld, and the Cancer full moon already is lighting up the roots of our emotions. So, this is bound to get colorful, I have a feeling. So, just like beware that these emotions are coming and that emotions are temporary, they are transit, like the waves of the ocean, the tides of the ocean, they ebb and they flow. And this is the tide coming in. And with it, it is washing a lot of shit up onto the beach for us to deal with. And that's okay. That's okay because all of these things that are coming up are ready. I like to think about it like, you know, I personally just feel extremely protected by my ancestors and my spiritual support in general. And so I like to think about it like if something is coming up right now, if like I'm having an experience in my life, I've been guided to this experience in my life to have this emotional reaction. That's because I have the tools. I've developed the tools that are needed to transmute this energy. So if something's coming up, I trust that I have what it takes, and even just that little bit of pause and trusting in yourself is very grounding in terms of a rush of emotions. It kind of helps you get to this like observation deck type place where you can more like look down in the tidal wave and look at it and spot like, oh, there's that thing and there's that thing. And you're still aware that there's this huge rush of emotions coming through you, but you are not the emotions. Like, you're not inside the emotions, you're around the emotions. Your awareness is bigger than the emotions when you're on the observation deck. And that, from that point, Mercury retrograde is really awesome in that regard too, where Mercury retrograde elevates our ability to observe at the inner workings of our mind. So as these tense, really powerful emotions rush through us, that inner observer is getting an eyeful. And the more we can tune into that inner observation, the smoother this entire ride is going to be. But because we have Pluto in the mix, where it's conjunct the sun and opposite the full moon, like, this release is deep and powerful at old structures crumbling. Like, after this, we will see ourselves differently. And like, your life is really just a reflection of how you see yourself. Your life is a reflection of what you believe you deserve. And what you believe you deserve is typically a reflection of who you think you are. So after this, who we see ourselves to be is very different. And with that, we upgrade what we think we deserve. And with the upgrade to what we deserve, we no longer tolerate bullshit from the past. And that is one thing that I just personally feel really grounded and thankful for the balancing energies of this universe, because it was talking about, this was from that same channel that I mentioned at the beginning, the Consciousness Evolution Journey. Love her. She put out a Mercury retrograde video this morning that I was able to watch just in time for this. So perfectly timed. But she does like tarot cards and some different oracle cards, and like uses that to help kind of channel her message. And it's just so beautiful every single time. She's clearly tuned in to something very powerful. And in her message, she was getting cards about balance and the balances of power, and how like the wheel of life is spinning, and the people who have been on the bottom of the wheel of life, now they're on the top, and the people who have been on the top, now they're on the bottom. And basically, like, think about it simply like givers and takers, you know, like the takers who have just been like, take, 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 take. Like, think about corporate America, like the executives in corporate America. Take, 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 take. They don't even know what is coming. Like, basically, when you think about these people on the bottom who are now going to be on the top, what that looks like in a practical sense, like the workforce at large. Like, think about it. We're already in the middle of the Great Resignation, where millions and millions and millions of people are quitting their jobs and going to different ones. Jobs numbers aren't down. Do you know what that means? That means that people left this job and they went to a different job. So these companies, there are companies out there who are suffering right now because they can't get workers. Like I said, I own a grocery store for the moment. And the companies that are having the hardest time are Pepsi and Frito. And they basically can't get delivery drivers to stay in the truck. Like, they hire them, a couple weeks later they quit. They hire them, a couple weeks later they quit. They raise their pay rate. They hire them, a couple weeks later they quit. They raise their pay rate. Hire them, a couple weeks later they quit. Like, WTF, I'm throwing money at the problem. Why isn't it working? Because you're treating them like shit. And through all of this energy that we've had going on, like going back to 2020, the great conjunction with Pluto, Jupiter, and Saturn, all in Capricorn, was kind of the kickoff to this. This Mercury retrograde Cancer full moon is just the latest installment of people recognizing, like, seeing themselves just a little more clearly, seeing who they really are a little more clearly. And with that, what they think they deserve gets a little better. And when what they think they deserve gets a little better, they put up with shit a little bit less. And when they stop putting up with shit, they leave these jobs that treat them like shit and they go somewhere where they don't. And companies like Pepsi, companies like Amazon, who have massive turnover, which I can't even imagine how expensive that is, massive turnover of people quitting and hiring new people all the time, and people quitting, and like all of that is because bad working conditions, really bad working conditions. And this next week is like a whole nother level of like the sun conjuncting that same point in Pluto, or the same point with Pluto in Capricorn, and opposite this full moon, where we're releasing this toxicity from inside of us. And now we have clear vision of who we really are and that we don't deserve this shit. And you think about that, it's like an uprising of the people, is what it is. And the people who are currently in power, who have gotten all fat and lazy and sassy, thinking that this gravy train's going to last forever, like, they've been on the top of the wheel. They have to go to the bottom if the top is, or if the bottom's going to rise to the top. So it's going to be a really interesting week, I think, to see, like, until next Friday. I mean, like, until we come back again, just because, like, yeah, we're already in the midst of these energies, these uprisings of the less powerful against the more powerful. Like, the balances of power have been really being like shaken from a foundational level for the last 2 years. And the people, the not so powerful ones, they're banding together in new ways. They're finding their ways into like-minded communities, and they're putting their power together and realizing and seeing themselves more clearly. They have more power than they were giving themselves credit for. And these kinds of practices that crappy companies are using to like just make the quality of life at those jobs like unlivable, that chicken is coming home to roost. Like, if you, like Pepsi, for example, like our Pepsi shelf is empty sometimes because we didn't get a delivery because they don't have a delivery driver. Pepsi's warehouse has all the product that we could ever need, and we don't have it at the grocery store because they can't keep delivery drivers in those jobs because the job sucks. Because most people who have a CDL, who are qualified for the job, now we're really off on a tangent. They have a CDL, and that allows you to drive a truck. And most truck drivers drive a truck. And most pop vendors expect the truck driver to get out of the truck, go around to the back, and unload maybe several dollyfuls or a pallet full of product into the store. And some of them even have them set the shelves. So you got to go in there, like, put the stuff on the shelves and like rotate it and all of that. And like most people with a CDL, they want to drive a truck. So Pepsi either needs a merchandiser, they need some kind of creative solution like that, which is going to eat into the bottom line. But again, I say, like, what's really valuable? Like, yeah, you're maximizing profits at that point by not having that merchandising position, by making the truck driver do it. But at the same time, like, if your product doesn't leave the warehouse, that's not profitable either. You're not selling anything and now profits drop to zero. So this is a time of us realizing like what's truly valuable here. And workers, people in general, are realizing the quality of life is much more important than a few extra dollars an hour, right? So you see like this is basically like bottom line out in the world, beware of the high paying jobs because you're going to earn every freaking dollar. Beware of, when you see like in town that all of a sudden there's a fast food chain paying like $2 or $3 more than everybody else, like, wow, what a great opportunity. Their turnover is high and they can't get people to stay because it sucks working there. So they're throwing money at the problem. So yeah, it's very interesting to watch these corporations who think life still revolves around money when the people have realized, no, it doesn't. And that is, the balances of power being restored. These corporations, they can't keep forcing their way. They can't keep just like throwing money at the problem and like putting profits over everything else. Like, it's not sustainable. And like this whole time of change, this whole Uranus and Taurus change is to bring back a sustainable way of living. So anything that's crumbling is right on time. This was around the time we started our work together too, was back in July. Yes, that was like that Cancer new moon coming back to a point of like, I really just want my work to be fun. I want to enjoy what I'm doing. I want to enjoy my life. I want to enjoy my home and my animals and my loved ones. Like, I want to be able to enjoy my finite time on this planet. And I'm no longer willing to like work 24/7 because that is not enjoyable for me personally. Everybody's different. Everybody's got to do it their own way. But yeah, what else, you guys? Anything else? I think that's all I have as far as these three topics. I do want to say also, I touched on it just a little bit here when we talked about Uranus stationing direct, that the North Node enters Taurus on January 19th. So that will happen before we come back next time on Friday next week. I am planning to talk about it in depth on Friday next week, so you can come for my latest understanding of those energies. I also have a video on my channel on these energies, the North Node moving through Taurus and the South Node moving through Scorpio. Fun fact, that video has officially become the most successful video on my channel of all time, so that's fun. Tidal waves of prosperity. Yeah, so that's super exciting. So that's like an hour and 45-minute in-depth look at the North Node entering Taurus. That's an 18-month transit. So it'll be there until July of 2023. So that's why I do spend so much time in a dedicated video to talk about that. I'm also personally really feeling that as a Taurus rising, Taurus Jupiter, the North Node going over both of those points is supposedly life-changing towards your soul's purpose. Highly recommend that you check out any of your own points that you have in Taurus or planets. And do a little Google of transit North Node conjunct natal, whatever you have in Jupiter, and not in Jupiter, in Taurus. You can see I'm winding down here, folks. 3 topics, that's pretty much my limit. And I think I'm going to come in almost on the money at the same length as last week, which is fun. I so appreciate you guys hanging out with me for astrology and coffee. I absolutely looked forward to getting to do this all week long. I'm already looking forward to next week's topics when the sun enters Aquarius. We're going to talk about the North Node in Taurus, the South Node in Scorpio. And then what is that other topic for next week? Mars entering Capricorn. So that, yes, we are going to talk about all 3 of those things next week here on Astrology and Coffee, my YouTube live stream every Friday morning at 10 a.m. Central Time. So Thank you so much for tuning into this. I so appreciate your presence in this space. You can learn more about me at owningauthenticity.com. That's where you can find all my offerings, all the things that I do. I have a lot of Gemini energy, so there's lots of things that I do. Yeah, I think that feels really good. Thank you. Thank you again for joining me. I hope you have a tremendous rest of your week. I would love to hear from you in the comments as far as how these energies play out over the next couple of days. I can already feel my emotions on the rise. So, yeah, we're just going to roll with it, take it in stride, and make the best of it like we always do. So, until next time, you take such good care of yourselves, and so will I.